The chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff has said the greatest threat to national security is not Iraq, Iran, or Afghanistan, but the federal debt. By 2013, the interest alone will exceed the entire defense budget. $100 trillion in unfunded liabilities loom on the horizon for my generation over the next century. How will you, item by item, eliminate the $1.3 trillion deficit that we had in 2010 to prevent federal default, troop defection, and severe social unrest in my future?
It's a great question, and great to have a young person asking it, because your generation and the ones to follow are the ones that are going to be most affected by this. And I have to say that this is one of the hardest areas, one of the most areas prone to, as I said earlier, smoke and mirrors that we deal with. But there were a couple of times when we cut through that, once on a bipartisan basis in 90, once with Democratic lifting alone. I remember that extremely well, and we put the pay-as-you-go rules in place, statutory spending caps, and of course a good economy helps with the deficit and lots of other things. And we balanced this budget in the 90s. It's not that we don't know how to do it. We paid off $400 billion of the national debt, and it wasn't just Social Security funds that did it, it was beyond that. So we need to understand how we did it. As I say, it's discouraging because our challenge is bigger now, our politics are more divided, but we've got to find a way to come together. And when I say that I have some hopes for the Simpson-Bowles connection.
Excuse me.
Excuse me?
I'm sorry, I'm just asking them not to have an outburst. Please continue, Congressman Price.
You need to put everything on the table. And when I say that I have some hopes for the Bowles-Simpson Commission, I certainly don't envision them going in a back room and solving this for us. I mean, I took those votes in the House, and I'll take them again. But I do think a commission historically has been helpful in lining out the problem, helping us understand it, helping the American people understand it, and perhaps building some political support in a very divided country.
Dr. Lawson?
So I prefer the answer to this question talking about the future as opposed to talking about the past, because this is the critical issue for our generation. And this is where we have to, as Americans, understand that these problems do not affect us as Democrats or Republicans. They affect all of us as Americans, which is why when I started running in 2008, I started giving out copies of our United States Constitution. It's not all that thick. There isn't a whole lot that the federal government is supposed to be doing. But when we let the federal government consume ever more of our lives to make promises that it is in no position to keep, we bring ourselves to the precipice that we face today.
Answer the question.
We have to start dealing with federal spending. That starts with the 57 cents out of every dollar we spend that goes to entitlements. Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. We have already defaulted on Social Security because we've been spending the surplus for the past 20 years. We have to look at our overseas entanglements. We are spending $80 billion a year in Afghanistan where we're training soldiers who have an illiteracy rate of 15%. That's not making us safer. Everything does need to be on the table.
Excuse me.
We have to start cutting entitlement spending, Medicare, and we have to start looking at how we transition to Social Security. And the other thing we have to do is get the economy growing again. I don't have a budget to present to you this evening. I really hope we can get to that point. But what I can tell you is that we don't continue to reward failure. We don't continue to bail out Wall Street. We don't continue to embark on port-filled stimulus projects that create more debt and further compound the problem.
Yeah. Congressman Price, you have 30 seconds for rebuttal.
Maybe this is one thing, despite some of the atmospherics here tonight, maybe this is one thing that we actually have more agreement on than we think. It could be. I've seen people come together on this. I've been part of an effort, and you know, it takes some work within your own party. It takes some work within the Republican Party to say, hey, some of these tax questions, yeah, they got to be on the table. It takes some work within our party to say some of these entitlement issues have to be on the table. But I do believe if we can agree that it's a challenge, we need to agree to take it on.
Time.
The next question will go first to Dr. Lawson.
Biotechnology is a major driver in the region's growth. One recent study comparing 6 southern regions found that the Triangle mustered $2,031 in university R&D dollars per regional worker, more than 75 times the equivalent figure for Charlotte and tops in the Southeast. In 2005, the federal government spent less than $100 per capita on NIH funding versus $1,600 per capita on defense spending. Where do you stand on the desirability and appropriateness of today's federal research investment?
I think we need to start transitioning research and development to the private sector. We need to change our tax laws so we stop punishing companies for we stop preventing companies from repatriating earnings, bring capital back to the United States, and get ourselves back to work. The fact that we've got a tremendous amount of defense spending, honestly, I wouldn't start by cutting research and development funding, but you also have to take into account the fact that while we may think that we're helping ourselves, this debt that's accumulating is affecting people all across the country. We have to have a little bit of enlightened self-interest and understand that it doesn't make sense for us to be borrowing money from China so that we can prop up our research and development here in the 4th District. We need to get funding for these critical investments to happen with local resources, with private resources, and stop relying on the federal government and its attempts to stimulate ourselves and borrow ourselves out of debt.
Congressman Price, you have 90 seconds.
What Mr. Lawson isn't quite saying, but is on the record as affirming, is that he basically wants no federal role in research. I believe, on the contrary, that the National Institutes of Health, the National Science Foundation, are among this country's crown jewels. They are among the greatest competitive advantages we have. And to skimp on that research support, and of course it's a thoroughly public-private effort, to skimp on that would be one of the most foolish decisions we could make. It would be unilateral disarmament in the face of international competition that is ready to take us on at every turn. Talk to businesses. Are you going to recognize this picture of oppressed businesses that want government not to do research? For goodness sakes, I don't know any business in the Triangle that would say that. University research, spinning off all the time into small enterprises, into startups. That's where our jobs come from. Research is our lifeblood here in the Triangle. It's the lifeblood of this country's economy. We're not going to race for the bottom in wages. We're not going to race for the bottom in environmental standards, but we're going to race for the top with new products, with innovations, with entrepreneurship, and research is essential to that. And the research triangle, of all places, should be the place from which that word goes out.
Dr. Lawson? Dr. Lawson, you have 30 seconds.
It's axiomatic that if you're a business taking government money, you will support government money. I started a business. I grew a business that grew up to 70 people right here in the Triangle. And we didn't get business loans from the federal government. We didn't get federal grants. We found private investment. Unfortunately, getting private investment is much harder today than it was 6 or 7 years ago. And we can thank our current economic policies and recently passed financial reform for that.